What's up, you beautiful Redditors? Hope you're having a fantastic Thursday. Welcome to the RNEWS Evening Show. And let's just jump into it. From r/news. Grand jury indicts one officer on criminal charges 6 months after Breonna Taylor fatally shot by police in Kentucky. Did they give a reasoning why this officer was charged and not the others? He fired blindly into windows. That was his mistake. He should have been firing blindly into innocent civilians. Yeah, he's getting charged for missing. I chuckled, but then realized this is exactly why he was charged. If his bullets had landed in Breonna Taylor, who was absolutely innocent in all of this guy would have gotten off scot-free. Emotions out. Serious answers only. If her boyfriend had killed one of the police, would he have been charged and convicted? He would have, in all likelihood, been killed on the spot. Not joking or kidding. There's a very frightening dynamic that occurs when a police officer gets injured. Like, literally, every on- and off-duty cop comes out of nowhere to find whoever did it and freak them up. Like a gang. It's always creeped me out how that happens. The FBI found literal gangs inside police departments, with tagging, initiations, and gang tattoos. So it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck. In effect, had the bullets missed her and still went through the wall into the neighbor's home, the officer would have been facing these exact charges. Her death was meaningless, a non-factor. Absolutely astonishing. You're watching the RNEWS show. From r/World News. Survey finds shocking and saddening lack of Holocaust knowledge among millennials and Gen Z. Gen X had grandparents that lived through the war and had stories to tell. It's not the lack of battle-scarred grandparents detailing the Holocaust that's the issue. The issue is the disintegration of the American schooling system. Also, the History Channel stopped running WW2 material constantly and replaced it with porn stars, rip-offs and shows about aliens. I'm early Gen Y, edit, millennial, and my class teacher in elementary was a child during World War II. We're Danish and her son lived in Germany. We were schooled hard on that subject. How old was your teacher? Millennials are hitting 40 now, so the teacher might have been in their 50s or 60s. I'm a millennial and my grandfather fought in the war. I'm an early millennial or late X born in 1980. Same. Zennial. Early 80s micro-generation don't really identify with millennials or Gen X. Lots of studies out there on it. Young enough to send a dick pic. Old enough to know better. This is kinda crazy considering I'm barely considered Gen Z and a lot of my learning upbringing in social studies was about WW2 and American politics. I've watched so many WW2 documentaries and many movies about it. You're watching the RNEWS show. From r/World News. Catching flu and COVID-19 at same time almost doubles risk of death. The good news is that with all the COVID preventions, the Southern Hemisphere has seen way reduced flu cases. When you fight something way more infectious than the flu gets left behind. The good news is that everything is terrible, so dying isn't such a bad thing. Except when you're responsible for someone who can't possibly take care of themselves and there's no one else to do it for you. No problem, friend. My previous comment about dying is applicable to everyone. COVID-19, prepare for trouble. Common flu, make it double. To protect the world from overpopulation, to spread mass death through every nation. To denounce the evils of masks and gloves, to extend the spread to the stars above. COVID, flu. Team Corona blast off at the speed of light. Meowth, my health, my right. Flu and COVID-19 stack. On a positive note, flu cases have plummeted this year due to lockdowns. You're watching the RNEWS show. From r/News. Seattle City Council votes to override mayor's veto of cuts to police budget. Next story will be the mayor approving extra emergency funds for the police department through some kind of executive order. Doesn't work that way at the municipal level. City Council holds the purse strings and is the ultimate arbiter of the budget. I wouldn't be surprised to see a police guild lawsuit out of it though, which may get some traction. Our system is very pro-labor, at least by US standards. Pro-labor for police and police alone, yup, it's Murica time cool. Nah. Some states are pretty good for workers, some not so much. When I moved to Texas, my first manager laughed when I brought up 2 10s and a 30-minute breaks per shift. Know a place in my state that fired people directly after they took workman's comp. That crap happens all the time. Funny how the state doesn't fight for those people. A lot of people who have never been to Seattle are bemoaning this like they're experts on the city. All of a sudden. As a lifelong Seattlean, I am appalled at this news. I can't even visit the Sky Needle or Pike's Place for a soda anymore without being attacked by rioters. And now they're cutting police funding. SMH my head. There's a SPD officer that earned over $500,000 last year in OT. You're watching the RNEWS show. From r/World News. The U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands has been accused of interfering in national politics after hosting an event for the far-right Forum for Democracy party. Pete Hoekstra, already wasn't popular before this. He famously claimed there are no-go zones, which he couldn't substantiate. Even worse, he falsely said that Dutch politicians had been set on fire, which isn't really a smart claim to make without evidence. He refused to answer questions about the incident and even went so far as to call it fake news. Like a true Republican. I remember that press conference. It was funny. He stood there thinking he could just state blatant lies and journalists wouldn't push back, like he's used to in USA, but the Dutch journalists just kept telling him he was talking bollocks. If I remember correctly, he said about the supposed no-go zones, then flatly refused he'd ever said it minutes after saying it on film. Think the interviewer offered to let him watch it back. Kick him out of the country. We don't want him back. WASNT this the guy that said there were no-go zones and politicians burned alive. Then deny it and call it fake news in less than 10 seconds after saying it. When the US sends their ambassadors, they are not sending their best people. They are fascists, climate change denialists, selfish bullies. Some of them, I assume, are good people. You're watching the RNEWS show. From r/Politics. Pelosi unveils Watergate-style anti-corruption reforms tailored for the Trump era. If we could stop referring to Democratic legislation as a wish list, that'd be great. How dare people want their taxpayer money to be spent on sensible things? It's Politico. They'll happily admit that everything is a horse race and that they never stray from their faux centrist narrative. It's not even centrist. Democrat wish list is a popular Republican buzzword. The measure, a 158-page Democratic wish list that includes curbs on pardons for close associates of the president, a requirement for campaigns to publicly report many foreign contacts, and a requirement for courts to prioritize congressional subpoenas, is House leaders' version of an antidote to what they see as weaknesses in Democratic government, exposed by President Donald Trump. That's neat and all, but why not go ahead and submit it as a bill and put the GOP on record for voting against it? At least then you can say you're actively trying than just talking about it. Notice how they always devalue Democratic legislation by calling it a wish list. Edit. Democratic. That's exactly what it is, though. You don't introduce an omnibus bill in September of an election year in a split government with the intention of passing it into law. You do it as a statement of values for your party. And that's where we're going to end today's show. But if you like what you saw, leave a like, and if you want to see more of the RNEWS show, hit that subscribe button. As always, this has been the RNEWS show and I'll see you tomorrow.